And we should be live.
Okay. Yeah, I think we're live now. Let me just check on my end on my phone, see what's happening there.
Yeah, if you can open it there too. Yeah, we're good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it shows that we're live. Perfect.
Awesome.
Okay, and then I reshare that. Okay.
Hi, Jessie. Thanks for being here.
Hello.
Oh, hello. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you for joining.
Is Penny there? Tell her I say hi.
Hello.
Hi, love. All right. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. As you're logging in, make sure you're saying hi so we know you're here. We can address you. And we're going to wait a little bit to make sure we can. She wants to go. Aw. Tell her I say hi and I miss her. All right. So as we're waiting for a few people to join, just letting everyone know this is our live discussion of the Nightingale. All right. All right.
I wonder. I could show on my iPad, but my iPad is shattered. So,
It's okay.
Unfortunately, you won't be seeing the book on my end, but
Thank you so much for joining us, guys. As you're logging in, make sure you say hi so we know you're here for our live show on The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. All right, so let's go ahead and start with some introductions. I guess we'll go ahead and get that started. So thank you guys so much for being here. I'm Isabel from Isabel Reads, and I'm joined by Jackie from the Reading Wordsmith. So I'm going to go ahead and ask Jackie to tell us a little bit about her channel and the kind of content that she puts together. And if you're not following her, please make sure you do so by the ending of this show.
Yeah, so I'm Jackie, like Isabel mentioned. I run the Reading Wordsmith. So I started out as a Bookstagram account and sharing my love of books through there, but now I've spread out to explore BookTube and Book Talk, and I share vlogs, TBRs, monthly wrap-ups, all of my thoughts, and sometimes controversial opinions because I don't always love the most popular books, but yeah, I share everything about the process of reading books and a little bit of lifestyle content in the background. And I'm trying to get more into vlogging about my book experiences.
Awesome. So my channel, Isabel Reads, basically follows my journey as a bibliophile. I love books, and it's usually featuring some big book haul that I'm doing or wrap-ups on whatever it is that I'm reading that month. I am also big into crafting, so I do feature a lot of my reading journal on my channel, and that creative outlet is important to me, and it combines both my loves for journaling and for reading. And I love reading thrillers and horror and manga. So you might be saying, what do you mean if this show is about the Nightingale? Well, we'll talk a little bit more about that, but the Nightingale is definitely out of my comfort zone. It is probably my least read genre, historical fiction. But yeah, so Jackie?
Oh, I was just gonna say that the genres that I usually read are historical fiction, so I push her to get out of her comfort zone. Fantasy and romance; those are my top three favorites. But I'm starting to branch out, like with my TBR, which will be coming out soon. I did pick out some titles that are some mysteries and thrillers, so I'm gonna be trying out some different things. And you also inspired me to start a reading journal and get in touch with like that crafty side of myself. So we'll see what comes of that.
I love to see it. Yes, I'm so excited. And yeah, definitely I had one Kristen Hanna book that I think that's how we first started talking about this. I believe I picked up The Women from Book of the Month or something, and I was like, I
Mhm.
don't know why I got this. I'm never gonna read this. I don't do historical fiction. And then Jackie and I were like, let's do a buddy read, and it's gonna be The Nightingale, because that's obviously a very popular book, and I think I'm glad I started with this one because it was a good start
Mhm.
into historical fiction, and I really enjoyed it, as we'll talk about now. But she did promise our next buddy read will be a thriller, so we'll see how that goes. All right, so let's go ahead and follow what we have planned. So once again, we did read together The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. We'll go ahead and together do a little bit of a summary. We agreed that we didn't want just one of us doing it because we both struggle with summaries. So and Jesse's asking if it's a World War II spy novel. Well, believe it or not, there were some people doing like kind of some trickery and watching out, and there were
Mhm.
posts, and so yeah, it does have a little bit of that. I don't think it's exactly what you're looking for in that aspect, Jesse, but it does have some aspects of that. Yeah.
I think it falls more within literary fiction than like spy thriller kind of aspect of it, but there is like a lot of intrigue in the story, so it's definitely very fast paced, and I will say that's pretty unique within the historical fiction genre. I feel like that can be a little bit more slow paced, but this keeps you guessing the whole way through.
Which I think is why it worked for me. I
Mhm.
since I do enjoy horror and thrillers and that kind of mystery, I think that's what appealed to me the most about this. And
Is
it's
there a
funny.
horse?
We kept having this conversation. He's like, "Oh, if it's historical fiction, there has to be a horse in it." I'm like,
No.
"No, I don't think that's the case." And there's no horse in this one. But yeah, so okay, so let's kind of start trying to do this book justice by doing a summary, right? So it's dual timeline kind of ish, right? So we start in like
Mhm.
present day.
Yeah, we start in the present day and then we go back to the past to 1939, and it all takes place in the past timeline in Nazi occupied France. And then in the present timeline, we split between the United States and Paris. And we are following two sisters basically in the story. So we're following Vian, who is a wife and a mother, and she's basically trying to live as normal a life as possible under the Nazi occupation. And then we also follow Isabel, who's a very feisty character. She wants to do her own thing, marches to the beat of her own drum, and she wants to join the French resistance.
Correct. And there is a discrepancy in like ages. Like one is older, which obviously impacts a little bit of like the ways that they view the world. And both sisters and their dynamic relationship kind of, that's kind of like in the backdrop of the entire book. So I did enjoy seeing that dynamic between the sisters and how that changed throughout. Okay, so Jessie Heather read it and she loved it. Yes.
Oh.
Awesome. I did not think I would love it, and obviously we'll talk about ratings in a little bit, but I also enjoyed it and I was very very surprised. So basically, yeah, as they're both navigating their experiences with Nazi occupied France, we kind of start seeing how Isabel is trying to, in her very rebellious nature, trying to do something like that's always been like her thing in life. Like she has to do something, like if she's seeing an injustice or she wants to speak up, or and Vianne throughout is kind of like just trying to deal with what is happening to her in the most kind of non-confrontational, peaceful, safe kind of way. And I think that also comes from a place of being older, having more experience, and she doesn't really have that rebellious nature like Isabel does. But eventually we do see her kind of with her character arc, which I'm sure we'll get to talking about later. We do see how that kind of does influence the rest of her actions throughout the book.
Mhm.
Other flashbacks, I think it's more like they feel like flash forwards, because I think the whole time we are in the past, right? How did you feel about that, Jackie?
Yeah, so I think the very first chapter is in the present day, so I was confused by that. And then we go into back into the past, but it feels like most of the story is grounded in the past, and it is a little bit like the narrator person from the future is trying to like relive this experience, but to the point where it feels almost like in I'm gonna compare this to Outlander. In season 2 of the show, the action is taking place in the past, and there's only like one flash at the beginning of the season and one flash at the end of like the present timeline. So it's more based in the past and less about her like telling the story necessarily.
Yeah. I did find that intriguing because it kind of keeps you guessing. We don't really know the identity of the narrator from the first chapter. We know obviously it's going to be one of the two sisters, but we don't know
Mhm.
which of them. So that's something that I like that aspect of the book. I kept trying to see, oh, which one would it be? Because obviously my hopes were that it was one of the sisters, which I'll ask Jackie later, like, if she was rooting for it to be one particular sister or the other, when we get to like our favorite sisters or whatnot. But it does keep you guessing. And there are clues, I think, throughout that point to it being one of the sisters as opposed to the other. But that was something that I found interesting. I kept trying to figure out which one was the narrator, like which one was the elderly woman that was kind of, thinking of reminiscing on what had happened.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that's pretty much a summary of it. Let's go ahead and, of course, if you're, I know a couple of you have joined. Thank you so much for joining us, guys. If you're just joining, just make sure you say hi so we know you're here. And yeah, if you've read the book, let us know a little bit about it. So let's talk a little bit about our initial impressions and expectations. Jackie, you want to go first?
So I had very high expectations for this, which may not be how you felt,
No.
but I've heard so many good things about the Nightingale for about a decade, ever since I started hearing that the book had come out. And I've seen a lot of people recommending it on BookTube, on Book Talk, on other platforms, and people that I really trusted their opinions because they read a lot of historical fiction and similar things to me. So I had high expectations for it. I didn't really know what the plot was about though, which I usually have a general sense of the plot from the summary or something. And I went in like almost completely blind into this. So that was very different for me, but I really hoped that I would like it, and it did meet those expectations.
That's awesome. So my expectations were that I knew this was going to be a good book. I just didn't think I would enjoy it. That's always my thing. Like, since it's not my preferred genre, I knew, I had no doubt that she was an excellent writer. I had no doubt that it was going to be a compelling story. I just felt I wasn't going to connect to it. I felt that it was going to be much slower paced than what it
Mhm.
was. And I also felt like I was going to feel a little bit maybe lost at times because it was going to be too much historical talk or war talk, or I didn't know enough about World War II to kind of get it, but I didn't feel that way at all. It almost felt like it was mostly character driven, and obviously the
Mhm.
characters are placed in this historical thing, but it was focused on the characters and their story, which I think is what worked so well for me. So it was definitely a pleasant surprise. Now, I don't know if most historical fiction is like this, you know what I mean? If it'll work as well for me.
So some things will be trickier for you. I came into this knowing a lot about World War II, so much to the point that I'm like, okay, I'm getting tired of reading about this because I know about all the big battles. I know all the things that happened. I know that they dug the trenches. I know which battles they won and then they lost. I was a huge history nerd in school, so I'm like, okay, I don't want to be reading that. So I would like that it was more character driven. And I think some periods are just easier to understand than others, and some books do a better job of explaining it, so it's really going to be like a case by case basis.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. So I'm willing to read from her again. I want to find another one that maybe I'll read. I think the Vietnam War set one, I think, is one that I can pick up next. I think that one will possibly
Mhm.
work well for me too. So let's talk a little bit about ratings. So if you're in the chat and you have read this, let us know what you rated it. I'll go ahead and start. So I did give this a 5 star. I never in a million years would have thought that I was gonna give a historical fiction a 5 star. But although it's not my favorite book of the month, like it's not my favorite thing that I read this month, simply because it's not my usual genre, I
Mhm.
couldn't not give it a 5 star. I thought it was so well written. I felt so many emotions. I connected with it emotionally. So I felt that it
Mhm.
deserved the 5 stars. I
Mhm.
really did. Jesse, okay, so Dune. Yeah, I know Ariel's read Dune as well, so maybe he can tell us a little bit about that. But yeah, so it was a 5 star read for me. What about you, Jackie?
So for me, it was also a 5-star read, and
Yes.
the number of 5 stars that I've given this year, I think, has counted to like one or two
Oh
total for the
my
entire year.
god.
I am a very harsh critic. I usually don't give 5 stars to books, and this was definitely one of my favorite reads, not just of the month, but of the entire year so far. I included it in my mid-year wrap up, and in my monthly wrap up, it'll be featured too. But I just love Kristen Hanna's writing. I
Yes.
read earlier this year Firefly Lane, and that was like a 4 star for me. Not my favorite from her, but it is set more in like an accessible time period because it's the 70s. So the 70s to the 2000s. And yeah, I didn't know it was going to be a 5 star, and I don't really give that rating often, so it surprised me with that.
That's awesome. It feels so good. I mean, when you find a 5 star like that. And for me, it mostly has to do with the characters. I know some people don't think that it was good character work or whatnot. I really do feel like the characters were relatable. I feel like I understood the dynamic of their relationship, the nuance of how hard headed they were at times, and how they struggled with their relationship. So I really enjoyed that. Like I that was my favorite part, honestly. Um, so yeah, I really like that. So let's, now that we kind of talked about a rating, and we did talk a little bit about some things about this genre in particular, let's talk about the writing. So I really enjoyed her storytelling. I do feel like it was emotional at times, and I know
Mhm.
purposefully certain decisions that the author made with some of the characters were done purposefully to appeal to us emotionally. Like I know that. But as far as the writing is concerned, I feel that this had so many beautiful lines, beautiful quotes. Jackie, do you have any that you in particular really liked? Were there any quotes or lines that you know
Come back to me in a second. I misplaced where I wrote them, but come back to me in a second.
Okay, I will. So obviously I loved I feel like a lot of her lines are very figurative, they're very beautiful, and they just like there were so many quotes that I felt you could pull from the page as like lessons or what this book was really about. Even like the I felt like the opening, right? Like that opening line, in love we find out who we want to be, in war we find out who we are. Just
Mhm.
lines like that that are so quotable. Like I felt like they
Yeah,
that
there's
you
another line like that that's like, but love has to be stronger than hate or there's no future for any of us.
That's,
I
I
feel
love
like
that.
that also, she uses a lot of these as like themes or motifs throughout the story.
Absolutely.
So it's like her giving commentary on what was happening in the story. That's what
Yeah.
it felt like to me a little bit with some of these like lines.
Yeah, and a lot of the lines I think were a commentary on like gender, and I like that
Mhm.
what she did with gender overall and how she placed this huge importance on what women were doing during the war as well. So here, for example, this line that stood out to me was a generation of men were going off to war again, and it kind of talks about how like there's a story to be told with women. Like yes, the men were going off to war and they obviously had a story to tell, but women also were doing a lot, and the role that women
Mhm.
played during the war, I think this book like shares that beautifully.
I think it's unique in that it centers women's stories, and you don't really hear a lot about what's happening with the men. Actually, you
Right.
only hear about it from the women's perspective of they're waiting at home, they don't know what's happening to their husbands. Whereas within a lot of the other things that I've read or watched, it's always this is the battle, this is what the men were doing, and then they came home to their wives, and I'm like, okay, but they were still living life outside of that. And also, I liked that at the flash forward, I think in one of the later scenes, it's
Mhm.
about her son finding out that she was so involved with the war and he had no
Yes.
idea. And there is
Yes.
some sort of line, I don't know how the exact quote, but it is basically that like men like to tell stories and women just like get on with it. And
Yeah.
that's
Love
essentially
that.
what it says.
Yeah, I remember that line that you're talking about. And it's almost like she had never even stopped to tell her son like everything that she was, and when he saw the recognition that they were
Mhm.
having for her and his aunt. And without getting too spoilery yet, I mean, we'll get there in a little bit, but it was something like that he couldn't believe, and she does allude to that right at the beginning as well, like how he only knew me as a mother. She kept saying that her son only had known her as a mother, like, and she says maybe at that part where she says maybe if I had danced more, if I had like shared my opinion more, maybe if I had voiced my myself more, he would know me as a person. And I love that in books per se, like
Mhm.
that commentary on how children a lot of times don't know their parents as being people, like you only know them in
Yes.
relation to you.
And I think that this speaks also can speak to like an older generation, especially where women were told to be seen and not heard, to not share their opinions. And I think
Correct.
that this is something that is changing now, but especially with the time that she was young in the 40s and 50s.
Correct.
And now she's an older woman, but it's like all this time has passed and they have those very traditional ideals. And it was actually after the war that things started to change. So I think that can be applied or is something that could resonate with some older women readers.
Definitely, I agree with that. um there's a lot to be said about women in World War II, Rosie the Riveter, and A League of Their Own. Yeah, and I think this is what the book does so beautifully. Obviously, with what Isabel is able to accomplish, I mean, it's incredible how she's able to save all these men, and she's able to really save a lot of people's lives, like behind the scenes, and the impact that she's having, and how brave. It speaks volumes of her bravery, how she's and it's crazy because it talks about like the horrors of war, but not on the battlefield. Like that's what I liked, like the horrors that they were living not on the battlefield. And
Mhm.
I thought that was very well done.
And I like that the story wasn't all focused on the concentration camps. I think that has been also told to a lot.
Yeah.
And those are very important stories to tell, of course, but there are other stories that needed to be told of the horrors of people who weren't in that situation. Okay, there were bad things happening in the camps, bad things happening on the battlefield, but even the people at home were really feeling it. Even the
Correct.
people at home were starving and were struggling to survive. And I think that with the like stories like Anne Frank's diary and all of that, you really see the fear because anybody could be just killed off, sent to a camp whenever. So it's getting to that root of that fear within him.
Yeah, so Jesse's asking if we've read The Great Alone. I have not, Jesse.
I have not yet. I've read The Nightingale, Firefly Lane, and then a few years ago, the first Kristen Hanna that I read was The Four Winds, which was a 1930s Great Depression Dust Bowl era story.
Yeah. Yeah, I have not, but again, I've heard great things about them. Have you read that, Jesse, or has Heather read that? I have not, but I do want to continue picking up her books. I do think that's something that I want to do. I'm not going to become a historical fiction reader per se, but I will become a Kristen Hanna reader. That's the most that I'm willing to say at this moment.
That's fine.
Oh, Heather, you're here. Welcome. Thanks for being here. It is so, so good. I highly recommend it. Heather, is that your favorite one of Kristen Hanna's? I'd love to know, because then I might pick that one up next. I think I'll go ahead and try that one. I was thinking more of the women, but if you like that one a lot, I think I'll pick that one up. I think that one actually has appeared on the AP test before. I think it's that
Hmm.
that one has a lot of accolades too. I think that one has been featured before on there.
Yeah, I
Um,
have it on my physical shelf to read, both The Great Alone and The Women. And I
yeah,
actually don't own any of the ones that I've read, except for Firefly Lane. I do own that one.
really.
I don't own the other ones.
So many tears. Yeah. So my husband says so many tears when she reads historical fiction. And I think I told Jackie this. Like, when I finished reading the book, I was sitting in bed and I closed the book and I was
Mhm.
sobbing. And then he's like, "What's going on?" And I'm like, "This is why I don't read historical fiction." As I was just like sobbing, this is too much for me.
You know, I think I actually have tougher skin about that because I cried a few times, but
Oh
I
my
and like I sobbed a little bit, but I think I just have like exposed myself so much to that I'm just like it doesn't
God.
phase me as much.
No, I did cry a lot. Hi Darcy, welcome. Thank you for being here. Um,
Hi.
which one of her books would you recommend starting with? That's a good question. I think Jackie
Um,
maybe.
the Nightingale, actually.
Yeah.
I think it's the most accessible to new readers. And if you like 70s, 80s, 90s, like that kind of stuff, then go with Firefly Lane. And then I would probably say of the ones that I've read, so I'd say The Nightingale, Firefly Lane, and then The Four Winds. I really loved all of them. I think The Four Winds is the most inaccessible to new readers, but I think The Nightingale just grips you. It's the best one to start with of those three.
I love the World War II aspect of the Nightingale, but The Great Alone is such a deeper personal story. I love that. See, I find that super exciting because
Mhm.
that's precisely what I liked most about this. Like that story, the personal story of Isabel Vian, the sisters, like Rachel, the friends. Like I really enjoyed how that was developed, like each of those stories. So if that's something that The Great Alone does well, I'm gonna enjoy that.
I think that all of Kristen Hanna's books are really rooted in like the personal stories. I
Yeah.
felt it a lot with, I mean, Firefly Lane, it's all about their personal stories because there's not a lot going on in the like political climate. I mean, there's a little bit with like Afghanistan and Iraq and all of that, but it's mainly focused on the friendship aspect of that. And
Love
then I would say that The Four Winds is focused on one woman's journey specifically. So it's
it.
it's always very rooted in the individual. And I think this is the one that had the broadest impact of all the ones that I've read so far.
And I do like that. I love the backdrop of whatever, historical movement or whatever's happening is there, but I do like the personal stories. For example, Khaled Hosseini is an author I really enjoy, and both The Kite Runner and A Thousand Splendid Suns do that beautifully. Like there's such personal stories where we get to know the characters and feel for the characters, and so I really enjoyed that, and I found a lot of similarity with this reading experience as I did with Khaled Hosseini. The Great Alone is set in Alaska after the Vietnam War. It touches on things that we are going through today as well politically. See, I love that. The
Mm.
relevance of that, right? Yeah, I definitely have to read that soon then. That's where we're gonna go next, I think. The Great
I think I'm
Alone.
gonna go for The Women next, solely because that's on my 25 books to read in
Oh
2025.
yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So The Women is gonna be next, and then maybe The Great Alone. But I have the physical books, so if my TBR jar picks it for me, I'm going with
There
it.
you go. I love it. I love it. So let's talk a little bit about the characters. So that's where we want to kind of move next. So um Jackie, do you want to talk, maybe start off with a favorite character if you had one, or you want to talk about the sibling dynamics or extra
Mhm.
characters, whatever you want? And of course, in the chat, if you want to tell us a little bit about some of your favorite characters or anything.
So I really liked, of course, the two sisters. Isabel, I felt connected to from the very beginning with that fire and rebelliousness, but I
Yeah.
didn't see myself in her. And I think I saw more of myself in like Mion's journey to learning what her power is, finding her voice over time, because I'm not that rebellious, fiery spirit. That's
Yeah.
more my sister. And then I'm like the more like, okay, let's pump the brakes. Like,
Yeah.
let's be peaceful about this. But over time I have learned when it's important to like stand up for myself and all that. So I saw myself in that journey. I know a lot of people get really frustrated with Vion, but I
Yeah.
feel like she had the most growth. Isabel felt a little bit more one note for me, and I liked that note a lot, but she was already like there. I think though by the end of it she learns to be a little bit more cautious
Correct.
and kind of rein in that rebelliousness of hers because she realizes she drives headlong into things that she doesn't even know what she's getting into.
Yeah.
And then for like side characters, I really appreciated that their dad was going through a lot of PTSD and that was explored, especially after he came back from the first war, World War, and all of that kind of stuff. And then some of the other side characters were interesting, but I didn't feel like super connected to all of them. Those were
Yeah.
just some of my thoughts.
Great. Yeah. I with Isabel's kind of who I wish I were, right? Like I wish I were that brave. I wish I could be more like her. Although at times I do feel like she was reckless. She didn't really put family first. She behaved like on impulse, right? So I can definitely feel that I'm more like Vienne, but Isabel is kind of like who I wish I could be, right? Even though Vianne was the smarter sister, she's the one that changes the most. She's more willing to change. She does do quite a few things that upset me, but I think that's realistic. That's how people are, you know, that's how we tend to, not everyone handles pressures and fear the same way. So I enjoyed that, and I enjoyed that difficulty for them communicating or seeing eye to eye continues through the pages throughout the ending of the book. So I like that. I like that as well, the way that they were developed. I also really loved the group of rebels. Like I really enjoyed how they would meet together and band together and protect each other, and how those men were to me just as brave, or if not braver, than the men that were off fighting the war. So I enjoyed their group as well, their group dynamic. And what did you think of Gaetan as like a love interest?
Oh boy. I felt like he really was the start of Isabel going off a little bit off the deep end with her storyline, but it is all her like pushing on and trying to join the rebels and all of that. I think that I don't know, he just doesn't appear so much in the narrative, especially at the beginning. And I understand why he was pulling away from Isabel a lot. He was like, okay, we're in this war. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. But also, it's like, yeah, you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So better live in the moment, right? Try to appreciate what you have while you have it, because you don't know when it's going to be gone.
I agree.
And I did want to mention, quick notes, that for Vion, finishing with that, I think that she did a lot of very controversial things, but it was how she responded in the aftermath that like redeemed her for me. She didn't just do this and was like, oops, I did this really bad thing. Oh no. She was like, oh, how do I fix this? What do I do? How do I make amends for this? And Rachel, wow. Rachel was a character that's such a heartbreaking storyline for her, and all of the things that happens with her.
Yeah, I think we're gonna do a little bit of spoilery. I think that we've, talked enough without spoilery. So from this point forward, if you're here and you haven't read, we might spoil a few things. So thank you again for being here. But if you want to leave us because you don't want it spoiled, but we do want to talk about some things that might be spoilery in nature from this point forward. So Heather, you like the dad storyline as well. I did too, and I feel he was so misunderstood, and how silence and being standoffish can sometimes be seen as lack of love, but it's everything that he was trying to work through. But definitely there was love there, right? Like there was love. um
I think for him, it wasn't that he was trying to be standoffish necessarily on purpose. I think he was locked with his inner demons in his brain, and he couldn't see beyond himself, basically. And at the end, he starts to realize, oh, I wasn't here for you and for your sister, and I failed as a father because I had all these things that I was trying to work through, and it came off like he was aloof because he didn't care about them, but really he was just like locked within his own inner demons. And I think that's a very accurate portrayal, or from what I've heard, rather, an accurate portrayal of like PTSD after war. You get like locked into those memories.
and it hurts so much when Isabel was so quick to judge him and say, oh, so now you're like all about the Nazis, right? That's what you're doing now. And she had no idea like what the father was doing, how he was trying to protect her, like, and she was so quick off the cuff to like say things that just came to her head, and she had no idea that she's not the only one who's, doing something for the cause. And this is about Gaetan. His character felt unnecessary at times. I didn't like who Isabel was with him. Right, I agree, Heather. I feel like she was so strong and she didn't need anyone, and then that those parts, I feel, I don't know if that was there to add a romantic, storyline, which I know next on our list is going over plot. So I think we kind of segue into that on our outline, go into plot. But I don't know why that was necessarily added there, because she seemed so soft, delicate, vulnerable, needy when it came to Gaetan, and like that's not who she was, right?
It felt very out of character for her, but I think the reason why Kristen Hanna included a love interest for her is because, oh my gosh, I'm going to share a major spoiler. But because she is not alive at the end, and she wanted her to feel like she still had some of those typical experiences that people should have, of like having that first love. And even if she wasn't going to have a family later on, at least she got to experience that. And I think she was trying to avoid readers being angry at her that like she didn't get to do so many things. Well, how could you end the story this way? So I think that was the reason why that was there, but it did feel like forced in some instances.
Yeah, and how do you feel about the reunion? Because that's something that I kind of like. I not that I didn't like. I just felt like if she survived everything she survived, and then she survives, and then she sees Gaetan, and then that's it. Like, so
Mhm.
I
I
don't
think
know how I feel about that.
so.
Because
This isn't just my opinion though. I think she should have like met up with Gaetan before, whatever. Like they had their whatever. She's still alive. Things are going. And if that was going to happen, how it did, it's when she reunites with her sister. They like have it all out. They clear things up, and then like because that would feel more like a closing piece of she needed to heal this rift, right?
yes,
And I think that would
yeah.
have been more fulfilling for me.
Yeah, it felt like she almost just needed to see him one last time and then die. Like it made it everything kind of like revolve around him. And I'm not
Mhm.
sure how, if that was needed. And it did feel rushed. I agree.
Yes.
Sometimes I feel it's me because I start reading like a crazy person. Because once we get to that point in the book, I just have to know. Like I just, so I'm like, is it me
Mhm.
that I'm rushing it because I'm reading so fast? But I feel exactly
Mhm.
the same way. I feel like it was rushed too.
The buildup was great. I think maybe it was a little bit too long in the buildup, and she could have cut down on some
Yeah.
of it. Like so many of the scenes with the first German, like
Yeah.
who was the from the Reichstag, I think, or
Yeah, I
I
forget.
did not say that right, but he was from the. It's like the precursor to the Gestapo police,
Yeah,
so they're
yeah,
like more civilized.
yeah,
Um, but there was so many scenes with him, and I was like, okay, we don't need this much of this development. Like, I get it, I get it. You could cut a little bit of this, and we focused so much, I think, on Beyond specifically that Isabel's storylines felt a little bit more pushed to the wayside, and she was with. I think she was with Beyond too long at the beginning of the story, so then everything else felt like, okay, gotta go, gotta go, gotta go, because we have to end at this point. And with the sisterhood thing, I think that them reconciling that would have been like a very Elsa and Anna moment, but I feel like that would have been like, oh, this is a truer love, right?
yeah.
Like Gaetan is just a man, it's just a love interest, but your family is like that familial bond is going to be deeper. I would have appreciated that.
I agree. I agree. Right, and that was not the character she was. Her life was so much more important to have her die after being reunited with him. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
It almost diminishes, right? Like everything that I mean, she survived the most atrocious of things. And it almost feels like that's all she was holding on for. Not again, like how you said, to make amends with her sister, or to it feels like that was like the only thing that she was waiting on. I really was very optimistic for a minute, and I was like, maybe she does get to live happily ever after, and she is this person who's narrating it, maybe it's gonna be okay. And then that kind of fooled me because the last thing I thought was that she would actually die after she had survived all of that. I really did think she'd make it. I don't know, did you think she would make it? I kind of did.
No.
No.
I didn't think she was gonna make it. I was like, oh, we're reuniting with him. This feels too convenient. This feels too perfect, right? And I think she also wanted to show that in war, people die. Like, even central characters of the story, even, your sibling, your brother, your sister, your father, your all of that. I think that the father's death had a lot more meaning in the story. I felt like that like added to it because he sacrificed himself for his daughter, so
Yes.
that adds to his redemption arc for all of the things that he missed before. I wish they would have had a chance to reconnect, but I think that it was very fitting for the story. But I don't know how I feel about Isabel's death. On the one hand, I understand it for the understanding that both of them couldn't make it out alive, but yes, yeah, Beyond loses everyone and it's
Yes.
heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And so I get that aspect, but also I would have loved to have seen them reunite more and build that bond after all these circumstances that happened.
Yeah. How do you feel about the scene with Rachel and her daughter? Like, it was a Sophie. Now I confuse Sophie and the other one. I don't remember their names now. But how did you feel? I was not expecting uh, that to
That
happen.
threw me for a loop. That
Yeah,
it was Sophie and what was her name? Oh, I don't remember.
yeah.
Sophie was Vion's daughter.
Okay. I forget now what her name was. I'm looking it up on the book. But I was not expecting that at all. Like I even had to reread that part. um
Yeah.
because I was like, wait, what did is she dead? Like, I didn't, I don't
But
know.
honestly, I feel like that was a kinder ending for her than she would have likely gotten otherwise.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, I can't remember Rachel's
Me
daughter's name.
either. I can't remember. I'm looking, but
Because, yeah, her son, the brother of the little girl, was lucky in that he survived all of it and he didn't get sent to a camp. But she was older, and so I feel like it would have been much more difficult to have her hidden. I don't think she would have lived. So I think that was a kinder ending for her story than she would have gotten otherwise.
sure. Um, I enjoy the pieces of like friendship, like that it does explore friendship and women like helping each other out or in moments of difficulty.
Mhm.
I do like Vianne's friendship with the nun. I feel like that was an interesting dynamic there, and Vianne's and Rachel's friendship as well. I enjoyed how she was able to build that into the story as well, like those topics of friendships. So let's move a little bit to like themes and topics, whatever you want to address to. But I do like how friendship in and of itself. I also like the dynamic of parent and child, uh,
Mhm.
how that dynamic works as well, and how she was able to put that together.
And I think the juxtaposition that she really showed with like all the things happening with Isabel versus Vion, and they kind of had very like parallel journeys that they were going on, but in different directions. I think just showing how all the sacrifices that they were both making, but in very like different ways. It
Yeah,
was a lot of personal sacrifice that Isabel did, but Vion had to sacrifice all of her family. And I think that they're both very powerful things. I think that theme kind of runs throughout. There's like the sacrifice of the father. Rachel is, one of the sacrifices that Vion has to end up making. And it's a very big thing of, well, we have to give this thing up. We don't have access to food anymore, and that's another thing that they had to sacrifice. But on that deeper level, it was sometimes those personal connections as well.
yeah. I think I really enjoyed how we saw with obviously like the hunger and the sicknesses and like the ailments and the brutal winter, and I really loved how she showed us like the true picture of how difficult these times were. I also like how she made Vienne experience two men pretty much like taking over her household, taking over her home, dictating what happens in her house. Like, I really love how she put Vienne up against that, and how she showed us that at times, like, there's only so much you can do, because you have to survive and you have to put your kids first. And so I think she was very harsh with Vienne. Kristen Hanna was really, really harsh, and it makes me think of what Heather says, like how she pretty much loses everything, and she's constantly struggling, where I feel like Isabel is out and riding bike and doing all these adventures, and yeah, and she
Mhm.
does hurt and suffer and all of that, but it's different because at least she's being proactive and she's escaping, if you will, and she doesn't have to stay home and bear the brunt of all of this.
And I think that there is a lot of discussion of like idealism and also trauma in this as well. Like with the idealism, everybody is just like, especially at the beginning, they don't think things are gonna get as bad as they do. They're like,
Sure.
there's no way that the Germans are gonna take over. Like France is sturdy, and that's not gonna happen. And it's a double-edged sword, I feel like, in the story. In
Yeah.
the one hand, I don't think that they were fully prepared for the realities and the brutality that would happen under the Nazi regime and how
Yeah.
things were going to like go from there. And then also on the other hand, it does give them a thing to look forward to try to survive. Like, I remember a time before this. I remember
Yes.
what life used to be like. We can get back to that if we can survive through all this hardship.
Yeah.
And then with the trauma, obviously the stuff with the father and World War I and coming back from that. And that's a different kind of trauma from the trauma that they all experienced during this Second World War. I feel like that trauma was a little bit more isolated and reserved more for the men on the battlefield because they didn't have people like invading countries as much necessarily in the same way that the Nazis did in World War II. The way that they invaded almost the entirety of Europe was unprecedented, and the changes that were enacted really affected home life, which I think was a like deeper effect than the First World War. there were hardships then, but it also compares it to the hardships happening in that Second World War. Very different. And there's also smaller instances of trauma with, like, okay, that was a traumatic experience between like friends, and you got to see different scales of the trauma as well.
Yeah, I do agree. Like it makes you feel like you lived it. I remember feeling panic, like not with the first German officer, but the second one. I forget his name, like the general or whatever he was. I would feel
Mm-hmm.
panic in the scenes that he was in. Like whenever he would walk up to Vianne or like approach her or be in the same room with her, I think I was holding my breath as I was reading because I was so scared of him. Like, and it made me feel like, wow, what must this feel like? And right when you know he's going to, push himself on her, I was just like, I know this is gonna happen, like it's inevitable, like this is what's gonna happen here. And I felt absolute dread. Like it's she did a really good job of, letting us feel those feelings. um
Mm-hmm. And you can really see the contrast between like the SS, the Gestapo, and those from the Weimar Republic, which was what came before,
yeah.
and just the change in ideology in like one generation, less than that, in a decade, and how things had progressed from there, or actually like deteriorated from there rather.
I love that you bring that up, Heather, how it's really like scary how it's reflecting what's happening, how all of a sudden, oh well, Jews have no rights here anymore, or Jews now can't live here, or you can't shop here, or you have to go here, or how like how things can change for a group of people, and how the government from one day to the next is saying that you no longer have these rights, or
Mhm.
whatever it is. Oh well, at first it was only if you were not born here, French born Jews, but now it's how things keep changing, and it's incredible. And this book was written in 2015 or whatnot, so perfect kind of time to be reading this because it's scarily accurate.
And you know what is very interesting that I don't think is very commonly known, but the idea for the concentration camps didn't start with the Nazis. It started before that, here in the United States. Hitler and or some of his people came and they saw, I think it was like the way that the native people were treated, the Trail of Tears, all of that. They were inspired by things like that.
Yeah.
And also there were other camps here. Even during the Second World War, there were camps here with all like Asian Americans basically being sent there. So that's a part of history that isn't talked about a lot. It's kind of brushed over because you want to paint the country as like we were the good guys, we joined the
Sure.
Allies, but there was an inspiration for it before the concentration camps happened in Europe.
Yeah. And it's pretty scary. um
Yes, the Japanese internment camps. That's what I was.
yeah, there we go. Let me put this on the screen so everyone can see. Okay, so we talked a little bit about plot, some themes. So let's talk a little bit about similar books or similar movies. So if we can think of any, and Jackie, if you've thought of any that you can compare this to, or other books, since you've read other historical fiction pieces, and people in the chat, of course.
Okay, so I can compare it to there's a lot of World War II things that I can compare it to. For like the similarities in the concentration camps and diving more into that, there's like The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, and there's a film for that as well. That one really gives you an insight onto how much like the German children had no idea what was happening because again, they're being brainwashed like this, but children aren't born with this level of prejudice. And we also see a lot of just the disastrous consequences that happened within the camps as well.
Yeah.
In a Japanese
Yeah.
internment camp. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, and we did see him at a con. Ariel and I had the privilege of hearing him talk at a super con that we went to. But yeah, and that's part of his story too. And I believe it's a children's book, right? If I remember correctly, I think it's a children's book that he wrote
Mm-hmm.
about that experience. Um I read that book with my fifth grade class. Oh, yeah, so it is a children's book. Yeah, awesome. Yeah. And it's interesting how all these things kind of overlap and connect and all of that. But those are great. I remember watching the Boy in the Striped Pajamas. I remember that was awful. I remember feeling that really hit. And I think this does a good job of also showcasing the children's perspective and the adults perspective, and the elderly, because we see Deanne as an older woman, how she's still like haunted by her experiences, and she has like her trunk with all her memories and all of
Yeah.
that, so how this has still affected her. And you talked about like the men coming back and how they were never the same again, like they were marked by this experience that they'd had.
And I think that serves in contrast to the Vietnam War. An entire generation was affected by World War II, so people had a lot more compassion for and understanding of the PTSD of that. But with the
True.
Vietnam War, it was only a select number. And because of that, there just wasn't an understanding of the traumas that they lived through. Also, Vietnam War happens like 20, 30 years down the line after this. And a lot of the people that had fought in that war were either, on the older side, so they were gone, or they were like not the young people, so they didn't have an understanding of what life was like in that.
Yeah.
For another
No,
recommendation, sorry.
no, I was reading Heather's Number the Stars. That's a really good one.
Mm,
Number the Stars is like a middle grade. That's really good too. And there was another one. Oh, The Book Thief. That's a really good one
yes.
too. Heather, those are really, really good recommendations.
I didn't love The Book Thief. I just found it to be so slow and boring.
Yeah.
So,
I read that a
um,
while back. Yeah.
I don't know if that's for everyone. I didn't love it, but I think it was important because it highlighted a lot of like the book banning and burning,
Correct. That's what I liked about it.
which is very like so prevalent today.
Yeah.
And then another recommendation is for a film, and this is completely different, but it's still set during World War II, but it's The Imitation Game. So it's set in 1939, but it's with the MI6. So we're in Britain,
Okay.
and it's about them trying to crack and break down Nazi codes. Very interesting. And we also kind of get to see the origins of the technology that would eventually lead to like the computer. So,
Wow, how cool. I've not seen that. I'll add it to my list. As far as books, I clearly remember being very impacted by Night by Eli Wiesel. I think that's such a
mhm.
good one. It's very, very short, but it's his personal experience in the concentration camps. And I remember I before he passed, I saw him like speak about it, and it was very, very touching and moving. It's a wonderful one, and that's more of a like high school, I think, level kind of book, but it's also really, really good, and it does remind me a lot about this too, because it does focus on all of those experiences. So those are some great recommendations for those of you who are looking for other World War II kind of inspired things. So next on our list, do we want to tackle some of the questions that we had before we kind of move to future buddy reads and stuff like that? Jackie, do you want to talk about
Yeah.
some of our discussion questions, because it seems to be going well? We have a lot of people who've kind of read.
Okay. I'm trying to see which ones we've kind of covered and which ones character development, secondary characters, pacing, we talked about that. Were you like what was the most shocking moment for you? I should say.
um the death of Rachel's daughter. I don't think I got over it. I wasn't
Mhm.
expecting it. Like I was not expecting it, and I had to reread it. I think that was for me the most shocking.
I think for me it was I think that the fact that the father like sacrificed himself, I thought he was going to do something else, and then he was being hanged and all of that, and I was like, whoa, whoa, what's happening here?
Yeah.
I didn't see that coming. I didn't see the thing with Rachel's daughter coming either, but I knew there was a risk in that happening, and I don't know. I just didn't think that something was going to happen with the dad in that way, especially because up to that point, pretty much, he had just been so stuck in his head that I didn't know if he was going to be able to pull himself out of it enough to try to save Isabel.
I also found, I think what like really got me was the experience of like Rachel's reaction to her daughter's death. Like
Mm-hmm.
that, I feel like it's real. Like it's such a real reaction. Like she's concerned about all the like, where do we put her body and what about this? And I didn't see her like freaking out over her dead daughter. Like, it was a very interesting reaction. So I was kind of surprised by how viscerally nuanced that scene was, because I can totally see how Rachel's now preoccupied with, like, what do I do with the body, or I can't leave her, instead of just like, my daughter's dead, like, like, forget the body, forget what we do with it, like, after, like, I can't, like, get past the fact that she's like dead, and I just found that whole scene um really impacted me, like, from the whole book, like, that stayed with me. Also, like, some of those torture scenes with her, like the torture scenes with Isabel, like, those also, like,
Mhm.
had an impact, I feel, in my reading experience of the book.
I think that Beyond is the one that jolts her out of her shock, because I think the first things that she does is like she's just frozen.
Yeah.
Rachel, when her daughter is killed, and Beyond's like, "No, we have to go. Like, if you stay here, you're gonna be dead too." And she wanted to give up, but Beyond is the one that reminds her, "You have a son. You have to try to live for him."
Yeah.
And I think that's her love for her son had to overcome the grief of her losing her daughter, and it
Yeah.
does ultimately, and that's how she leaves that situation. But it's really Beyond stepping up to the plate in that moment and like pushing her to take the step, which
Yeah.
was like, I don't know, it was a very good character development moment for her. And it's in contrast to when earlier in the book she gives a list of names of all the Jewish teachers that work at the
Yeah.
school and lists Rachel as one of them.
Yeah, and I like that Vianna was a teacher, and I loved, like, the lessons she teaches her daughter too. And I loved seeing a little bit of in her daughter. I enjoyed seeing parts of Vianne and Isabel too, because her daughter was, more outspoken or more rebellious, and I enjoyed seeing that. And like, how there are a couple quotes there that I really liked, where she talks about how, like, yeah, like, how could I teach my daughter to turn a blind eye to these things that are happening? Like, I
Mhm.
have to, for her sake, I have to teach her that there's something, if something can be done, we're going to do it, because just surviving is not what we're here for. Like, that's what lesson am I teaching her? So I like that too. I felt it was very real.
And I think fundamentally at its core, that's the question of nature versus nurture, of the fact that Vian grew up in a very different time period, and her daughter is growing up with the influence of Isabel and also all of these terrible things happening around her. So it hardens her in a way that I
Yeah.
don't think that Vian was as like a younger person. And
Correct.
I didn't expect that Sophie was gonna be like gone at the end of the novel, like just not
Yeah.
present. I was confused. I was like, her son. What do you mean, my son?
Yeah.
What about your daughter?
Correct. Which is why at first I didn't think it was Vianne. I was like, is this Isabel? Like, is this Isabel? Because we didn't know who it was. So I liked that aspect of it. But I that adds to what Heather had said earlier. Like, she does lose everyone. Like, she even has to, outlive her daughter. Like, it's just like, how
Mhm.
much can she take? Even after everything is done, like, she still now has the loss of her daughter.
Yes. It was pretty heartbreaking to see. And I know that her daughter doesn't die from any complications related to the war
Yeah,
specifically.
it's just cancer, right? I think they say,
Mhm.
like, she says it toward that ending part. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
which I mean, it could have been affected by like conditions from the war, could have from malnutrition when she was growing up can,
sure.
cause issues later on, but not a
Yeah,
direct impact.
correct. There was a question that we had, which I kind of wanted to bring up, like, of the dual timelines, like, which one did we feel more engaged with, or what POV or whatnot. So,
Mhm.
I really loved, like, the present, the 1995. I loved it. I do feel like we went a really long time without going back to it. I wish there would have been more going back to that timeline a little bit. Did you feel like that too, or you thought it
Yeah,
was?
it felt a little bit like a throwaway at the beginning. And then later I realized, oh, this is how the story is all connecting. So I think maybe those chapters could have been shorter and it could have been little snippets like thrown in more. Rather than adding necessarily more of it, I'd say spread it out better, because that could have also interrupted some of the pacing stuff.
Yeah.
Because I know that we had some issues with the pacing, especially at the end when it was so fast. So maybe we cut out some of that from the beginning and then we throw it in a little bit later to break up, like, okay, and let's take a pause in the action, and this is what's happening in the present in 1995.
Yeah, at first, when I saw we went so long without going back to the present, I thought it was just going to be a framing thing. Like, literally, first chapter and literally last chapter. I was like, okay, we're just going to have like this framing thing. But
Hmm.
then we kind of like jumped back into it in the middle for a bit and came back. So, yeah, I mean, I kind of thought it was okay, although the appeal at first, like, I wanted more of that older woman voice. I really enjoyed that, and I would have wanted to see the exploration of their relationship a little bit more, like mother son dynamic, because there were so
Yes.
many beautiful lines there. Like when he goes to put, like, she noticed that he was smoking, and then she's like, I would have told him something, but what could I possibly tell him that he doesn't already know? And why would I like harm this exchange, what we have right
Mhm.
now, with a reminder of you shouldn't be smoking? And I thought that was so smart, brilliant. Like how a lot of times we damage our relationships by saying the unnecessary. Like we know he shouldn't be smoking. Why do I need to like tarnish this moment right now by reminding him of that? So I loved those little moments, and I wish we would have gotten more of them.
I think that also at the beginning, like since we started with that perspective, I was not invested. At the first chapter, I will say I was like, I don't care. I don't know who you are. I don't care about you.
Yeah,
Later I became invested when I realized I was like, oh, this is connected to
yeah,
this. But at the beginning, it just felt, like I said, very throwaway to me. And that's
yeah,
why at the beginning of this, I was like, I'm not sure. I don't know if this is gonna be one that I like.
yeah,
To be determined, but later I wanted more development with her son, and that just doesn't really happen. I don't
right,
know. And I feel like the way that he comes to be and all of that in the story is like there should have been some fallout. I
yeah,
think there should have been some sort of fallout, some addressing of that, whether it was just reaffirming that like I am the son of the man who raised me, or like, you know, address something there. But
yeah,
it just felt like she added that content of, okay, he's not biologically her husband's child, and then didn't do anything with it. So
yeah.
at that point, and she's stressing about it and all of this stuff of beyond thinking about it and thinking about it. And I'm like, just either remove all that or make it a plot point.
Yeah, missed opportunity, maybe. I think so too.
Mhm.
And Heather, yeah, I agree. She did it for that. Heather says that maybe she kept it shorter to not give away that it was Vianne. Because, yeah, I think that was the whole, like, we're wondering, is it Isabel? Is it Vianne? Which one is it? So if she divulges or spends too much time in that present day, she has to give it away. And that's something that she really doesn't give away to the very end, which I was invested. I wanted to know which one it was. Like, I really did. And maybe it's because I was just hoping Isabel would survive. Like that was like my whole thing. I really wanted her to live, but
I was invested, but I wasn't trying to figure that out. I was just like, the answer will come to me when it comes to me. I'm very much the kind of person when if I read a thriller or mystery, I'm like, well, I'm not gonna try to figure this out. I'm just gonna let it play out. I'm
yeah,
gonna let it play out. We'll see how things go, and we'll go from there because it kind of ruins some of it for me if I'm trying so hard to like put it together.
yeah.
So I just like to see how it unfolds.
Yeah, that's the fun part for me as a seasoned thriller murder mystery reader. Like that's what I'm in. I'm in for the clues. I want to solve it. I want to know who it is. And I remember going back to that first chapter, and like once I was invested in like the past story, the two sisters, I'm like, wait a minute. And I went back and I'm like, oh, there's no clue as to which one it is. And I kept trying to like piece it together.
Mhm. I feel like it would have been a good idea is if after I finished the book, I went back and put all of those scenes in the present day and read those together to see
Sure.
how it all like fit together.
That's a good idea.
Um, and I think that I'm just in it for the drama. Like for me, I'm the person sitting there and like I'm gonna sit back and watch all the drama play out. With a
Yeah.
thriller or a mystery, like I like watching those as movies sometimes, and I'm like I'm gonna
Yeah.
sit back, enjoy this, and I'm taking in the tea because that's what I like in my books.
Yeah.
Is when there is a lot of plot going on, I like to just watch the drama all unfold. I think that's why I like period drama so much.
You
There's
do.
just so many antics happening.
Sure. Um, we let me see if there's anything else. How did you feel about the whole Nightingale thing? Like the name, like the title, obviously that she's the titular Nightingale, and what that represents. We haven't really talked about that. How did you feel
Oh my
about that?
goodness, this is like a huge thing. This is a title.
Yeah, we're
I
exactly.
didn't really know what it meant when I was going into the book. I was like, why is it called the
Yeah,
Nightingale? Didn't mean anything to me.
yeah,
But then later when that was her code name, I don't know,
yeah.
I was like, oh, this makes sense. Like it started to put the pieces together. And I don't know, I'm so curious how they figured out that it was her. Like, okay, she confesses, but they take her in for questioning. So what was the leak? Where was the leak of figuring out that these people were doing all these, like sending the British airmen through the Pyrenees and all of that? Where
Correct.
did that happen? I had a lot of questions, I think, at the end of this. Like, I wanted to know more about the Julian and Beyond relationship. I wanted
Yeah,
to know more about how did the Germans figure this out? I mean, of course, they had their intelligence going and all of that, but and then just the aftermath of, like, did Vian ever cope with her father's death? How did she process that? You just are left with a lot of questions at the end. But I think that's, purposeful, so you keep reflecting on the story.
yeah,
And yeah, I don't know. I didn't know where the Nightingale stuff was going at the beginning. I was
yeah.
like, okay, what does this mean exactly? And then when I saw that it was these rescue missions, I thought it was really interesting. It was cool. It reminded me a little bit of, oh my god, what is that TV show? It's a book too. All the light we cannot see.
Oh yeah, that's a good. I haven't read that, and that's another one that I might give a shot to
Yes.
reading.
All the light we cannot see. That one where it's also like the code names and stuff.
Yep.
And it gave me a little bit of like the spy aspect, which is also in like the Imitation Game and stuff like that. So I don't know. I liked it. I liked that it added intrigue to the story.
Me too, me too. And I like that it's like a bird and she was like this free spirit and
Mm-hmm.
like she got to come and go. I really enjoyed that and I enjoyed like when she's being questioned and how her father takes on the identity of the nightingale to take the blame, and he's like I'm the nightingale, so I really like that and I like that that was the title. I thought it was very pretty. I enjoyed that. I like that.
I'm trying to think. What
Let's see.
other question?
Any others? Um,
Which timeline were you more invested in the past, Vion or Isabel's?
so I was scared of reading the Isabel timeline. So I was invested in her timeline, but I kind of enjoyed not hearing about it because it meant like she's fine, she's okay. And I knew Vianne was nothing was gonna happen to Vianne. Like I knew she was gonna survive. So every time we would go back to Isabel, I'm like, is this the last time we're gonna see her? Like, so I was scared.
I think that whenever I paused reading the book, it was always in a Vion chapter.
Um,
I could never put it down in an Isabel chapter. I was like, I need to make sure she's fine here. I cannot stop it right here. Or it would be right at the very beginning of an Isabel chapter where it's like, and then I was gonna go do this thing with and I was like, no, 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 I need to stop right now. There were so many moments where I would put my iPad down, stop the audiobook, and then just be like, I need 5 minutes. I
yeah,
need 5 minutes before I dive into this because it's going to be bad.
yeah,
I
yeah,
just had that foreboding, that premonition throughout, and I was like,
yeah.
I was waiting for it. I think I told you I was like, this is not going to end well. I'm not happy.
I know. I had hope, I had hope that we'd get. I mean, I'm glad, like we got to see a lot of her, and just the fact that she survived that concentration camp and that whole experience, like that shows you how strong she was, So, and I'm glad that she does die surrounded by the people she loves, and so I think that's a good thing. I was okay with that, or I made peace with it because of the conditions under which she is in her last moments.
I think I would have been super disappointed if she had passed away in the camp.
Yeah, me too.
Like, that would have been such a missed opportunity. I think the biggest one, but I'm
Yeah,
glad that she is able to pull through to see her family once again. But I feel like I knew that it was when they're describing how she's getting weaker and weaker in the camps, and then afterwards she's not improving. I was like,
yeah,
no, this is it. We're not like getting through this one. And the comparison, oh, this is another thing. The comparison between her and the final moments of her mother was interesting because I
yes,
feel like the mother wasn't really mentioned a lot throughout the
yeah,
story. she's only really mentioned as being like the glue of the family and the reason that the father kept trying after he came back from the war. But her presence isn't really felt throughout. And I like that even though Isabel was so young when her mother died, in her final days, she was thinking about that, which I think that's, from what I've heard, I think that's very common with people who are near the end of their life. They start to remember and reminisce about people that have been gone for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah, that at those moments when I saw that she had been home for a bit and she wasn't improving, that's when I kind of assumed things were, not gonna be okay.
Yeah.
That it wasn't enough that she had made it back home. At least she held on to that moment kind of a thing. But I sobbed. I was sobbing forever until I did cry a lot. Like I've cried the most I think with this book this year. Like it was a lot.
Oh my goodness. I cried a lot for this one, but I also cried a lot with some of the Outlander books. There's a
Sure.
character that dies
What
in,
book are you on?
I finished all of them.
You're done. Okay, yeah, so you're
I'm
invested.
done with all of them except for the last one, which she is currently writing. So I
Okay.
can't read that yet.
Wow.
But it has a title. I don't remember what it is. It has a title now, so she's working on it. But the seventh book, An Echo in the Bone, it's like a side character, but he's a very beloved side character, passes away, and just the aftermath of the grief and trauma of that, I was bawling my eyes out, and then it was a similar level of bawling my eyes out for this. And I think that for that book, it was more unexpected for me because
Sure.
he dies after like just a long illness, which that's something that I personally feel more connected to and destroys me more
Sure.
than
Yeah.
the storyline in World War II because I kind of knew something was going to happen there. Like I had the idea that it could, and I don't know, just the way that it happened.
It's crying 5 minutes before. No, it's been like a week or two. But when I finished the book, that I sobbed even more. So as it was happening, but I when I closed the book, it was just like I could not stop crying for like a minute. Um,
That was me with that other book in the Outlander series. I literally closed the book and I was numb. I was numb. I was like, I'm not well. I need to come back to this and
yeah,
I need to come back to this in 3 to 5 business days. Don't
yeah,
talk to me until then.
it's a lot. It's a lot.
Oh,
Yeah. So, we were thinking our next buddy read is a thriller. We would love to have some of you who are here with us tell us if you want to read, if you want to join us for a buddy read. Do you have any recommendations? We're thinking a thriller is where we want to go next. Jackie, if you're
mhm.
still up for that, yeah, for a
Yes,
thriller.
no, I'm up for that. I'm going to be reading. I One of them is a mystery, and then I don't know if I'm reading also a thriller. Trying to read one this month because they're
Okay.
ones from my physical TBR.
Okay.
Spoiler: I did already pick from the TBR jar.
Yes, I can't wait to see what came up. But yeah, we'd love to have some of you join us. Heather, if you want to join us. I feel like
Mhm.
you've already read this with us because all your replies were so good. So let us know if you have some ideas for a thriller that you would love to see us buddy read or you would like to join us for. Drop a couple of book titles there, and then we can
Mhm.
kind of decide on what we want to do and give you some dates in case you want to join us. Yes, Heather says yes. So we'd love for you to
Just
join us on a
please one that's like more beginner friendly would be ideal. Like
Jackie's
one that isn't going to make me want to jump out of my skin because I'm so scared.
yeah, so we'll do a thriller. We'll do a thriller that has like some plot twists and stuff like that. But yeah, you guys can leave us some comments, and then what we'll do is maybe narrow it down to a couple titles, and then have you guys vote, and then we can
Mhm.
kind of read that. And if you want to join us, we can set up. We did 2 live streams for this buddy read actually, so we can do a couple more for our next read that we want to do together. So as we're kind of wrapping up, Jackie, do you want to share some of your upcoming things in your channel, videos we can look forward to seeing?
Something with a horse in it.
Ah.
Oh my goodness. So also if anyone wants to do another buddy read with me, like another buddy read with me separately about not necessarily a mystery or thriller. I will be doing a mystery thriller like for this, but just
Nice.
for historical fiction or romance or fantasy, I'm totally down. Just feel free to contact me. So you can find me at Reading Wordsmith on Instagram or YouTube, and you can like direct message me if you're interested in buddy reading something. I'm always down and open. So that's just my little FYI there.
Excellent.
And then for my channel coming up, I have a lot of things in the works. I'm working on that video with the TBR jar, which I just shared me making that. And I also just did my picks for that. So I'm going to be sharing a video about my TBR jar, picking my July TBR. And then I have like a summer romance recommendations video coming up, a bunch of other like things in the works. Any John Mars books are good for thriller beginners. Okay.
Yes, Heather, I agree. The one is excellent.
Mhm.
I also enjoyed the Marriage Act. That one was really good. Maybe we can pick a John Mars. I haven't read all of them, but maybe a John Mars would be good. Um,
Yeah, I could be persuaded.
yeah, maybe.
Depending
I don't
on.
know. Which ones have you read, Heather? Because maybe we can pick one you haven't read, and then we can
Mhm.
kind of do that together. Let us know. So yeah, Jackie. Okay, so those are some upcoming kind of plans that you have for your channel.
And also, I would like to be doing some more like reading sprints. I'm thinking Sunday nights, but I don't have an exact schedule for that yet. So stay tuned. I'm going to be mentioning some more of that. But yeah, more reading vlogs and reading sprints and just some more of this live interaction. I love this.
Yes, it's so fun. So let's see. My channel, I am currently working on my mid-year freakout tag that I'm currently working on that.
That's
I
such a
have
fun
to
tag.
do my wrap up and I have to do my TBR for July as well as a journal update. And I just came back from Orlando with a little road trip for my husband with my husband and I. And I went to like four used bookstores. So that's a vlog
Ooh.
coming. I'm almost done editing it, so I'm doing that. But yeah, I have some of those projects. So if you're not following Jackie's channel, please make sure that you subscribe to her channel as well as mine, so you can keep checking out the things that we're reading. I love the one. The one was great, Heather. It was
Mm.
so good. I talk about being invested in the different timelines because that book, every chapter is one of the seven like couples or whatever that you're following, but it's almost like at the beginning you're like, no, what do you mean a new couple? But then once you've met all the couples, like every time you leave one, you know you're gonna get another couple, but it doesn't matter because you're invested in all of the timelines equally. At least that was my
Mm.
experience.
I
It
do.
was
I will say I like different time, like different perspectives and timelines. Like that's something I love in my stories. So I think
yeah,
that
it
would be
was
great
so
in a thriller.
there's one. Okay, so Heather, you've only read that one. So there's one that has, I'm gonna look it up. It's
Hmm.
the one that the mom and the daughter or the sister and the mom live together in a house. I've heard that one is really good. I don't remember the name. I'm gonna look it up, but maybe we can do that one. So we can maybe buddy read that one. That would be fun. Because his books are very like that, like page turnery, like
Hmm.
they're really, really good. He has domestic thrillers and he also has like the sci-fi thrillers, which I think
Mm.
are like my favorite. The ones that have a sci-fi component. The one is basically like that there's a DNA test that you can take to find your perfect match. Like that's what it is.
Oh my
And so,
gosh, I've read this, but as a romance.
that's the soulmate equation, right?
This is the soulmate equation as a
Yeah,
romance,
yeah,
except
yeah.
I think that
This
thriller is
one,
more realistic
yeah,
of what would happen.
this one doesn't. It's not great. This one doesn't end well. So this
Well,
is
I'm
definitely
saying that's like you get your perfect match, and this is
yeah,
what would actually happen in real life.
correct,
It
correct.
would be creepy.
Oh, yes, it's that one, Heather. Keep it in the family or something. I think it's that one. I think that's the one. Maybe that's the one I'm thinking. So yeah, we'll put it up to vote, and then whoever wants to join us for the next buddy read, we'll do like a little schedule, and then maybe we can buddy
Mhm.
read it together. It's so fun.
Ugh, I love that.
That's awesome. So let's see if there's anything else. That's all on my end. Thank you guys. We've been here for an hour and 18. I'm sorry. I wanted to keep it to an hour, but we had such good conversation.
Mhm.
Thank you guys so much. You're right about the one. I was invested in every single storyline. Yes. That's such a great read. That I've recommended that book so much because I found it to be so good. I know there's like a Netflix movie or TV show. I haven't really seen it, but I know that there's an
Hmm.
adaptation of that. Yeah. Um,
Interesting.
Yeah,
And I could be down for one that has some sci-fi elements too, because I do like fantasy and sci-fi.
I love that. The
Anything that kind of bridges the gap for me into the thriller genre would be helpful.
Perfect. I think that one does. If you like sci-fi, and it's not anything like, it's just the whole concept of a DNA test that finds your match. That's as far as the science is concerned.
Oh, I
But
love
it,
that premise though.
yeah, me too, me too. I think it's really cool. All right, guys, thank you guys so much for being here with us. We thoroughly enjoyed reading this book together, talking to you guys about it, and I can't wait to do this again, Jackie.
Yeah, I'm so excited.
Yes. So yeah, we'll put a couple Heather, I'll contact you if you want to join us. If anyone else in the chat wants to join us for the buddy read, let me know. And it'll be a
Yeah, you can
thriller.
message either of us on Instagram. That's the best place.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Anything else, Jackie, that you want to add?
Just that my May nope, wrong.
Just soon.
I'm back in May actually. My June wrap up will also be coming soon. I'm just gonna space it out a little bit with the mid year tag because very similar kind of concept. So it'll also be coming.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you, Heather. I appreciate you.
Thank you
Big
for joining us.
thank you. All right, guys. Thank you so much for being here with us. I appreciate all of you. Have a great rest of your nights. That's all for now. Bye, guys.